I recall my early years as a period marked by contrasts. I had to listen to my mom's daily tirade about how much she detested her job, while other children grumbled about their parents working too much. It was the same every evening. After returning from the accounting business, she would place her suitcase on the kitchen counter and begin to rant. "Amanda, you won't believe what my boss said today," she would say as she hardly removed her coat. He dared to raise doubts about my quarterly reports. Me, I've worked here for 15 years. Even at the age of 10, I could already sense my parents' differences. Dad, who had a network of stores, would just shake his head and continue to eat his supper. He was the pragmatic one all the time. "Sarah," he would remark to Mom in a soothing tone that nevertheless exacerbated her anxiety, "if you hate it so much, find another job." "Another job?" She would laugh. "Mark, I don't want another job. I'd rather not work. I want to be at home and have the life I've earned." At this point, Dad would typically laugh, which always sent Mom into a new round of whining. "You find it amusing. Do you find it funny that your wife is unhappy?" I discovered how to ignore these discussions and concentrate on the book I was reading or the assignment I needed to do. But when we received the call regarding Uncle Jerry, everything was different. I can still clearly recall that night. During dinner, Dad was unusually silent, and when he eventually interrupted Mom, she was going through her typical ritual of complaining. With a simple "Jerry died," he set down his fork. Mom paused in the middle. Was Uncle Jerry present? Did he leave anything, after all? Dad let out a deep sigh. His nephews inherited his inheritance. One of them is me. Mom's dish clattered as her fork struck it. How much? $200,000. The ensuing hush was deafening. I saw the change in my mother's face. Her eyes opened, the lines of her continuous scowl smoothed out, and a grin like I had never seen before appeared on her face. She muttered, "Mark," and reached across the table to take his hand. "Are you aware of what this implies? I've been talking about a vacation property that we could purchase." "No," Dad forcefully interrupted her. "Do you recall how often you expressed a desire for freedom? Well, this is our opportunity. I intend to launch my own company." "A business." Mom's voice became octave higher. He went on, "A courier company," as though she hadn't said anything. "I spent years studying it. We could make it work with this money. You may give up your work and assist me in managing it. We would run our own affairs." The looks on Mom's face changed from disappointment to calculation to surrender to hope. "Fine," she finally said. "However, I get to be the accountant, and I want beautiful things once we start to make money." "Very nice things, Mark." Dad gripped her hand and grinned. "Deal." The initial 3 years were difficult. While Mom took care of the books, Dad put in endless hours to launch his courier business. After school, I spent a lot of time in the workplace, watching them create something out of nothing. Even the challenging days seemed valuable because of the excitement and sense of possibilities that pervaded the atmosphere despite the long hours. Then nearly 3 years later, everything was different. The company began to make a genuine profit, and all of a sudden our lives were very different. We relocated from our little home to a luxurious new residence in the affluent area of the city. Dad purchased a Mercedes for Mom and one for himself. However, the significant shift was not in our environment. My mother had it. She said, "I'm done," at breakfast one morning. "I'm leaving the firm, Mark. I no longer want to work." Dad simply nodded as if he had anticipated this. "Okay, honey, we can hire another accountant." My cereal almost suffocated me. Like that? As simple as that. Mom was already browsing through her phone when she grinned. Look. Melissa recently returned from a trip to Paris. I ought to give her a call. Mom's new pals, including Melissa, were all affluent businesswomen who spent their days planning their next trip and shopping. One by one, her old acquaintances who had been around when we were normal began to go out of her life. I began spending more time at work with Dad while Mom was redefining herself. Though my heart wasn't in it, I made an effort to learn about the company with the hopes of eventually taking over. I murmured, "Dad," as I watched him go over delivery routes one day. "What if I told you that when I grow up, I don't want to be the company's manager? I believe I want to work as a dentist." Rather of displaying disappointment, his expression brightened. "Really? Give me more details about that." So I did. I told him how much I enjoyed my biology studies, how I thought dental operations were fascinating, and how I hoped to have my own clinic eventually. He paid attention to everything, really interested in asking questions. Mom, meantime, had hardly returned home. She was always traveling with her new pals to places like Aspen, Cabo, or the Maldives. I can't remember how many times I requested to accompany her. "Mom, can I come on your trip to Europe next month?" One day, as I watched her load yet another new luggage, I questioned. She didn't even raise her head. "Oh, no, honey. I use these excursions as an opportunity to escape from, well, everything. You'll understand how draining family life can be when you become older." I wanted to make it clear that she no longer truly took part in family activities. She was too preoccupied with getting over it. But I simply turned to go. What was the purpose? This stranger, who was more concerned with her fancy handbags than her daughter, took the place of the mother who used to help me with my schoolwork and prepared chocolate chip pancakes on Sundays. Graduating from high school came and went, and before I knew it, I was preparing to move to another state for dentistry school. With the same meticulous care he put into everything in his life, Dad helped me move into my dorm and set up my room. I didn't get help moving in from Mom. She was enjoying someone's new yacht with her buddies in the Bahamas. I would phone home every Sunday at 7:00 p.m. Dad would show up on screen right away, curious to know about my life, my friends, and my classes. He would hunch over the camera, listening intently to every word of anatomy classes and dentistry treatments. Mom would loiter in the background, typically browsing through her phone, when she made the effort to join the calls. We developed a routine. My greatest calls were really when Mom didn't show up at all, just Dad and I talking about everything and nothing. Then came the call that made all the difference. Dad's voice was different that Sunday. "Amanda," he said, "I need to tell you something." Nothing could have prepared me for what he said next, but I could tell by his tone that whatever was coming wasn't good. "It's cancer, and it's aggressive." Everything shook on its axis. "What? No, that isn't feasible. You're in good health." 6 months. Perhaps less, he interrupted me gently. "I am selling the business. Your mother and you couldn't manage it, and I want everything resolved before." He didn't have to finish the statement. It was a blur, those 6 months. Attempting to divide my time between home and school, I watched helplessly as my dearest friend and support, my father, deteriorated before my very eyes. At least he didn't have to worry about it in his last week since, thank God, he sold the firm soon. When anyone was available to see, Mom would pretend to be the loyal wife while Dad was unwell. However, I noticed the calculating glance she would give his prescription regimen and the way, when she thought no one was watching, she would examine his business paperwork. Dad softly passed away in his sleep a month after selling the business. When it occurred, I was holding his hand. Mom was at a spa. The funeral was a Broadway-caliber performance. Mom cried uncontrollably, clinging to her friend's arms as she struggled to stay upright. With her elegantly understated makeup and beautiful black dress, she looked like the epitome of a sad widow. However, it seemed as though someone had flicked a switch as the final visitor departed. She wiped her eyes, straightened up, and went to the mirror to adjust her mascara. "Well," she responded abruptly and professionally, "that's finished. We must now discuss the finances." Unable to comprehend the change, I gazed at her. "Dad just passed away, Mom." She didn't sound awful when she said, "I know, honey, and it's terrible. However, life goes on, and consider what we could do with the proceeds from the sale of the business. I've got my eye on this stunning Spanish home." The reading of the will came next. In contrast to Dad's warm presence, the notary's office seemed antiseptic and frigid. Mom sat behind me, pressing her manicured nails on her leather handbag while wearing a black couture dress that was obviously different from the one she wore at the burial. Dad's old friend and lawyer, Mr. Peterson, cleared his throat and started reading. Having a sound mind, before he reached the crux of the matter, his voice continued to ramble on about the legal preliminary steps. "My wife, Sarah Thompson, and my daughter, Amanda Thompson, are to share the family home equally." Mom ceased tapping. "In addition, I have set up a trust fund to pay for Amanda's ongoing dental education, which will cover all costs until she earns her degree." I could feel Mom's tension building beside me. "The remaining assets, including proceeds from the sale of the business, are to be divided as follows: 60% to my daughter, Amanda Thompson, and 40% to my wife, Sarah Thompson." The tapping resumed, faster now, almost violent. "This is ridiculous." Mom burst out before Mr. Peterson could continue. "There must be some mistake." "There's no mistake, Mrs. Thompson," Mr. Peterson said quietly. "Mark was very clear about his wishes." Mom turned to me, her face a mask of calculated sympathy. "Amanda, honey, you have to see how unfair this is. Your education is already being paid for, and you'll make plenty of money once you're a dentist. I'm your mother. I need this money to maintain my lifestyle. Maybe try spending less." The words came out before I could stop them. Her face transformed instantly, the sympathetic mask dropping away to reveal raw fury. "How dare you? After everything I've sacrificed for you." "What exactly have you sacrificed, Mom? You haven't worked in years. You've been on permanent vacation while Dad built everything we have." "I don't have to listen to this." She stood up, gathering her designer purse and jacket. "When you decide to stop being selfish and ungrateful, you know where to find me." The door slammed behind her with enough force to rattle the diplomas on Mr. Peterson's wall. "Your father knew this might happen," Mr. Peterson said gently. "He wanted to make sure you were taken care of." Days turned into weeks. No calls, no texts, no emails. The silence was deafening, but also strangely peaceful. I threw myself into my studies, trying to make Dad proud, trying not to think about Mom's reaction or what it said about her, about us. "She'll get over it," I told myself as I reviewed dental anatomy late at night. "She'll calm down eventually." But deep down, I knew something had broken in that notary's office, something that had been cracking for years. And unlike the broken bones and damaged teeth I was learning to fix in school, this wasn't something that could be mended with study or skill or science. One day, I was taking a study break, mindlessly scrolling through social media when I saw it. At first, my brain couldn't process what I was looking at. Mom, tanned and glowing, wrapped in the arms of a man who couldn't be more than 35. The caption beneath the photo stopped my heart. Asterisk finally married to my soulmate, Millie Woods. Love wins asterisk. My phone slipped from my numb fingers. Asterisk married without telling me asterisk. I tried calling her immediately, my hands shaking so badly. I could barely hit the right numbers, straight to voicemail, of course. That night, I couldn't sleep. The image of them together kept playing in my head, along with 1,000 questions. By morning, I'd made up my mind. I packed a small bag and caught the first flight home. The house looked exactly the same as when I'd left it after the funeral. Dad's rose bushes were still perfectly trimmed. His favorite chair was visible through the living room window. The only difference was the shiny red Porsche in the driveway that definitely hadn't been there before. Mom opened the door wearing a silk robe I'd never seen before. Her surprised expression quickly turned to anger. "Amanda, what are you doing here?" Her voice was ice cold. "I saw your post," I managed to say. "You got married." "No one invited you here," she snapped. But before she could close the door, a man appeared behind her, the one from the photo. Up close, he looked even younger. "Babe, who is it?" he asked, wrapping an arm around her waist. "Nobody important," Mom replied. "Just my daughter who doesn't know how to call before showing up." I felt like I'd been slapped. Your daughter who didn't even know you got married? "My personal life is none of your business," she said, lifting her chin defiantly. "None of mine. Dad's only been gone 3 months." She laughed, then a harsh sound that held no humor. "Oh, sweetie, Brad and I have known each other for years. Why do you think I took all those solo vacations? Those trips were boring. Brad made them very interesting, didn't you, darling?" He smirked, pulling her closer. I felt sick. "How could you do this to Dad?" My voice was barely a whisper. "Your father was boring," she shot back. "Always work, work, work. Brad knows how to have fun. Now I suggest you leave before I call the police. This is my house now, and you're not welcome here." "This is half my house," I reminded her. "Dad left it to both of us." "Get out," she screamed, her composed facade cracking. "Get out of my house. Go back to your precious studies and your perfect little life that your father bought you." I backed away, tears blurring my vision. The last thing I saw before the door slammed was Brad pulling Mom into a kiss, both of them laughing. I made it to my rental car before the sobs came. All those trips, all those times she said she needed breaks from the family. How long had she been living this double life? How long had she been betraying Dad, betraying all of us? Another month passed. I was in the middle of a dental anatomy class when my phone buzzed. Mrs. Jenkins, our old neighbor who'd lived next door for 15 years, was calling. Odd, she never called. "Amanda, honey," her voice was hesitant. "I thought you should know there are moving trucks at your house. Your mother is selling it." The words didn't make sense at first. "That's impossible. The house is half mine." "Well, there's a sold sign in the yard, and they're clearing everything out." My hands were shaking as I dialed Mom's number, expecting the usual silence. To my surprise, she answered on the first ring. Well, if it isn't my studious daughter." Her voice dripped with sarcasm. "Mom, what's this about selling the house?" She laughed, a sound that sent chills down my spine. "Oh, that. Yes, Brad and I got a fantastic price for it. We're moving to Mexico. The weather's so much better there." "You can't sell the house," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's half mine. Dad left it to both of us." "Funny thing about that," she said, sounding almost gleeful. "It turns out it's pretty easy to forge a signature. Just a few practice runs and voila, the house is sold." The world tilted sideways. You forged my signature." "Mom, that's fraud. That's a crime." "Oh, please," she scoffed. "If you hadn't been so selfish with your father's money, I wouldn't have had to do this. Brad and I deserve to enjoy life." Enjoy life? Speaking of which, I just bought him the most gorgeous Jaguar. He's so happy with it. He's happy with your money. I said, disgusted. You little brat, she spat. You're just jealous because I have a gorgeous young husband who adores me, while you're all alone with your boring books and your little dental tools. What do you know about love? I know Dad loved you, I said quietly. He loved you for 30 years, and this is how you repay him. Your father, she laughed again, harsher this time. Your precious father who left you more money than me, who treated me like I was some kind of trophy wife. Well, now I have a real trophy, a young handsome husband who knows how to have fun. And guess what? We don't care about your American laws in Mexico. We don't care about you, your inheritance, or anything else. We're going to live the life I deserve. Mom, please. Face it, Amanda, you're just a sad, lonely little girl who's jealous of her mother's happiness. When was the last time you even had a date? Too busy playing with teeth to have a real life, aren't you? Before I could respond, the line went dead. I sat there in the empty classroom, my phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the silence. My mother had just admitted to committing fraud. She had stolen my inheritance, my home, everything I had left of Dad, and she was proud of it. Life has a funny way of moving forward, with or without you. In the years following Mom's disappearance to Mexico, I finished dental school, completed my residency, and started working at a respected clinic. Dad's inheritance helped me buy a beautiful apartment in a quiet neighborhood, and I was building the life I'd always dreamed of. I thought about Mom sometimes, usually late at night when I couldn't sleep. I wondered if she was happy with her choices, if her young husband was worth destroying her family for. But mostly, I tried not to think about her at all. Then one ordinary Tuesday evening, as I was unwinding after a long day at the clinic, my doorbell rang. I wasn't prepared for what I saw through the peephole. There stood my mother, but not the perfectly coiffed, designer-clad woman I remembered. This woman was haggard, wearing wrinkles, clothes that had seen better days. Her once immaculate hair was graying at the roots, and her expensive makeup was nowhere to be seen. Against my better judgment, I opened the door. "Amanda," she whispered, her eyes filling with tears. "Baby, please." "What are you doing here?" Her voice came out softer. She pushed past me into the apartment, her eyes darting around desperately. "I need your help. Brad, he..." She choked back the words. "He took everything. Everything." I couldn't help the hint of satisfaction in my voice. All the money. The house. What was left of the inheritance. He spent it all on gambling and parties in Mexico. Then she wrapped her arms around herself. Then he met some 20-year-old at a club. They ran off together. Took the Jaguar. Took what little money was left. I stood there, watching her cry, feeling nothing but satisfaction. "I used my last dollars to fly back here," she continued. "Amanda, I know I made mistakes, but I'm your mother. Let me stay here with you. Please." A laugh bubbled up from somewhere deep inside me, surprising us both. "Stay here with me? Why are you laughing?" Her face darkened. "This isn't funny. I have nowhere else to go. Maybe you should have thought about that before you forged my signature and stole my house," I said, my laughter dying away. "I was wrong," she wailed, falling onto my couch. "I know that now. I'm sorry. Please, Amanda, I'm your mother." "No," I said quietly. "You stopped being my mother the day Dad died. Maybe even before that. I want you to leave." She shot to her feet, tears instantly replaced by rage. "You ungrateful little. After everything I've done for you, everything you've done to me." I corrected her. "Now get out. You can't do this to me." She screamed, mascara running down her cheeks. "I'll tell everyone what a horrible daughter you are. I'll tell them how you left your poor mother homeless. What will your fancy doctor friends think about that? As my mother's threats echoed through my apartment, I calmly pulled out my phone. Sometimes the best weapons aren't weapons at all. They're just the truth, preserved at the right moment. Before you continue with your threats, I said quietly, there's something you should hear. I pressed play, and her own voice filled the room. Younger, more confident, dripping with that familiar mockery from years ago. Oh, please, if you hadn't been so selfish with your father's money, I wouldn't have had to do this. It turns out it's pretty easy to forge a signature, just a few practice runs. And while the house is sold. The color drained from my mother's face as she listened to her past self-confess to fraud. Her legs gave out, and she sank back onto my couch. You recorded that call. Dad taught me to always be prepared, I said, stopping the playback. He also taught me about consequences, something you never seem to understand. You wouldn't, she whispered, but the uncertainty in her voice was clear. Wouldn't I? Fraud is a federal crime, Mom. Forging documents for financial gain, that's years in prison. I'm sure the police would be very interested in this recording. She stared at me, and for the first time, I saw real fear in her eyes. Not manipulation, not calculation, genuine fear. I'll leave, she said quickly. I'll go. Just don't. Turn you in? I asked. Like you were just threatening to turn everyone against me. I leaned closer. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to walk out that door, and you're never going to contact me again. No calls, no visits, no messages through friends. If I ever hear from you again, this recording goes straight to the FBI. She stood on shaky legs, clutching her worn purse to her chest. At the door, she turned back one last time. Amanda, I'm still your mother. No, I said softly. You're just a woman who gave birth to me. My mother died a long time ago, probably around the time she started cheating on my father at those resorts. She flinched as if I'd slapped her, then hurried out the door. I stood there for a long time after she left, listening to the silence of my apartment. Then I walked to my bedroom and pulled out an old photo album, one of the few things I'd managed to save before she sold the house. There was a picture of us from when I was little, Mom, Dad, and me at the beach, all smiling, all happy. I touched Dad's face gently. I miss you, I whispered. Then I closed the album and put it away. I don't know what happened to my mother after that day. I don't know if she found somewhere to live, if she ever rebuilt her life, or if she ever truly regretted what she'd done. Sometimes people ask about her, and I simply say, we're not in touch. The truth is, I don't want to know. The woman in that photo album, the mother who once loved me, is gone. The stranger who showed up at my door that day, she's not my problem anymore.